Like, is that crazy? Am I insane?
What is up, guys? Sean here, and today we are going to be talking about Krystal and Saagar, formerly of The Hill Rising, now on their new show, Breaking Dawn Part 2. Now, I've never discussed Krystal and Saagar on this YouTube channel to this point, and the reason for that is because they are the epitome of that meme that you see on the internet and has been around in American politics for basically forever. And of course, the meme that I'm referring to, which I can't really say out loud, you gotta come a little closer. Come here. Come here. Closer. Okay. Is that the Democrats and Republican voters are realizing that they have more in common with each other than they do with their parties that represent the elites. This is a new wave of American politics where populists from the left and populists from the right realize that they have more in common than they do disagree about. Now, when I say this has been around forever, I mean this has been around forever. I remember a version of this came along with the Ron Paul Dennis Kucinich team up, where people were like, wouldn't it be a great dream ticket if Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich ran for president together? Now, Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich both agreed that they were anti-war. They were people who voted against the Iraq War and wanted to bring our troops home. But other than that, they had nothing in common. Ron Paul is the standard bearer for libertarian thought, or at least was at the time, and Dennis Kucinich was a socialist. So any team up of the two would have made no sense and broken down absolutely immediately once they got past the issue to which they had common ground on. You see this all the time with people trying to pair Tulsi Gabbard with somebody on the right, even though Tulsi Gabbard, the reason she was on the outs with the Democratic Party is because she resigned over how she believed the DNC was treating Bernie Sanders. Because Tulsi Gabbard is basically Bernie Sanders on domestic policy with a more isolationist foreign policy. So the idea that she's going to merge with like a Rand Paul or somebody who's anti-war and a libertarian on the right, it's just not the case. It's absolutely ridiculous. And this is why I don't talk about these people, because I'm over that phase in my life, and you should have gotten over it as soon as you pass the age of about 16. But yet, it persists, and anytime that you're selling this idea that you have the secret knowledge of the secret alliance against the secret elites that are secretly doing everything to you, you tend to wade into conspiracy territory. And that's why we're going to talk about, for our first video ever on Krystal and Saagar, their coverage of this Blackrock Conspiracy scandal, where they get everything wrong because they didn't bother to do any research. But it's really emotional, and I want you guys to see it. So first red flag, obviously from the title, the word neolibs appears there. Now, I'm basically going to make this a rule. Anytime you hear somebody or see somebody on the internet using the term neoliberal or neolib, you might as well tune them out, because basically you might as well be listening to static. This is the catch-all for evil bad person on the internet today. It doesn't mean anything in the context that they're using it. Calm down, people who are going to pull up the dictionary definition of it, but when people on the internet are using it, it's completely worthless. And again, it's just the prelude to nonsensical talking, which is based on nonsensical thinking. But now let's get into the video itself.
Looking at. There's actually a lot of interesting going on with this.
Oh, yeah.
We've been covering now for quite a while about the wild housing market. I did a radar back when we were at Rising about this Wall Street Journal article pointing out that now if you sell your home, very likely that permanent capital is going to be the buyer. They're coming in with all cash. They're outbidding first-time attempted home buyers. They profile this couple that's like trying to buy a house. It's in it's in like Allentown, Pennsylvania, or something. Not a major metro area, but this had come to small towns, and they had this stat in here about how 1/5 of the buyers of single-family homes are now permanent capital, private equity in particular.
So I know this will come as no shock to any of you who've ever watched any of my videos ever, but everything that Krystal Ball just said there was wrong, misinterpreted or misunderstood or outright made up levels of wrong. And we're going to have to go through it piece by piece so that you can understand exactly how the setup, the foundation to the conspiracy theorizing that's going to go on in this video is based absolutely on nothing.
And they had this stat in here about how 1/5 of the buyers of single family homes are now permanent capital, private equity in particular.
So Krystal is all over the place here, and in fact, she's mixing up multiple different articles that reference different phenomenon that we're seeing in the housing market. But first, we have to zero in on the statistics so that you can understand it about how 1 in 5 new purchasers of single-family homes are investors, specifically, potentially, private capital. This stat is completely made up, and it is based on the utter and complete shameful ignorance of both Krystal and Saagar on what an investor purchasing a home actually means. You see, if you go to any statistical breakdown of this, what you will find out is that an investor is anybody who buys a home for the purpose of not living in it. And what do I mean by that? So if you're going to buy a home and you're going to move in and that's where you're going to live, you are not considered an investor. However, if you are going to buy a home and you want to rent it out to somebody, you are counted as an investor, whether you're a big financial firm, an institutional investor, or if you're an individual who's just trying to make money. If you buy a rundown house, you fix it up, and then you want to sell it to somebody else, that makes you an investor. If you buy, like the communist senator from Vermont, a vacation home, since that's not your primary residence, you are also an investor. If you buy, like the communist senator from Vermont, a home in Washington, D.C. so that you can be closer to your work when you're working in Washington, D.C., then that is not your permanent residence. So again, you are an investor in that scenario. The 1 in 5 number does not refer to investors in the way that you're thinking of them and the way that Krystal Ball is thinking of them, as in institutional investment operations. It just refers to people in general that are buying these homes for whatever purpose, as long as that purpose isn't to move into the home and not sell it in a quick turnaround, or rent it out, or do something else with it. Now, if you want to know the number of institutional investors buying single-family homes, it's actually less than 1%. Now, I have seen some numbers that suggest that the less than 1% number may have risen closer to 2% in recent years. However, the original less than 1% number comes from the Federal Reserve, which typically has more detailed statistics on large financial institutions and what their holdings might be. The survey that says that it's around 2% is less reliable in my opinion, and also it doesn't account for the fact that there's a number of reasons why these big financial institutions may come into possession of a form of property, whether that be a home or anything, for time to time on a temporary basis. Remember, we're in really goofy economic times post-COVID with all this stimulus money floating around and artificially low interest rates from the Federal Reserve. But overall, it is less than 1% or 2%, not 20%, Krystal Ball just making things up and showing us that she doesn't understand what it means for a buyer to be categorized as an investor. Also, I'm not done yet, because even that 1 in 5 investors purchasing single-family homes is deceptive again, because when they say that 1 in 5 homes are being bought up by investors, typically what they don't tell you is that skews heavily towards lower quality homes. Again, this would lead anybody who's logical in thinking to determine that these are people who buy homes for the purposes of fixing them up to either resell them or rent them. In fact, as you go from poor quality homes or homes in poor neighborhoods, homes with low value, the percentage of investors buying those homes goes significantly down.
Coming in with all cash, they're outbidding first-time attempted home buyers. They profile this couple that's like trying to buy a house. It's in it's in like Allentown, Pennsylvania, or something. Not a major metro area, but this had come to small towns.
Now, the next thing we have to address is this one person from one article that talks about how they were outbid 6 times in a town looking for homes, and they claim that they were outbid by cash offers. And Krystal Ball has interpreted this to mean that they were outbid by private equity capital firms trying to strangle out the middle class. But here's the thing. Cash offers are actually down in recent years, not up. And one of the reasons why cash offers are down on homes is because interest rates are artificially low. So this would be what we call an anomaly. Number 2, there's a lot of people that are moving out of big major metropolitan areas because of a thing, and honestly, I keep forgetting how to pronounce this word, so I'm going to put it up on screen and try to sound it out. called the virus, and this causes people to move out of the big cities where they might own property that's much more expensive and move to more rural areas in order to get more space, smaller towns, etc. These are the people that typically pay in cash when they buy something. Big financial firms are completely aware of the artificially low interest rates, so it's actually in their best interest to use the money that's incredibly cheap coming from the Fed to finance homes rather than purchase them in cash. But individuals just want to own something outright. So again, we have a complete and utter swing and a miss on behalf of Krystal. Nice work. Really buying into this segment. Can't wait for you guys to delve into conspiracy theories as you're starting off by getting everything wrong.
And there was a tweet about this article that's been out for a while and specifically focused on Blackrock that just went wildly
Mega viral. Yeah.
On the internet. But for a long time, we were being sold this narrative that the reason housing prices were going up is because the professional managerial class were making different choices and they were buying up homes, et cetera, et cetera. No, come to find out, this is a bubble that permanent capital is inflating and then also profiting off of in a bid to basically become America's landlord, and that is a terrifying state of affairs.
No.
Now we're going to talk about Blackrock, and I'm going to break down how basically every single journalistic institution and the commentary community that just regurgitates what they see in headlines have gotten this story completely wrong in a minute. But I wanted you to hear how private equity, apparently, is working to become America's landlord after I debunked a series of false statements by the person putting out this narrative. But first, we gotta get into some more conspiracy theory because honestly, absolutely wonderful stuff from Krystal and Saagar.
It is, and this is what I want to just lay it out for people. What is happening here is not free market capitalism, because what's happening here is you have these private equity giants and more, which have made billions of dollars during the pandemic. Now, they're not getting into the housing market to enrich the community. They're not going to sell that house eventually. This is about creating a permanent middle-class rentier class.
So I love how Saagar just inserts all this conspiratorial nonsense that doesn't make any sense unless you're buying into an ideology that there's evil people that are scheming against you at the top that want you to become permanent renters because reasons. Now, all of this is based on this story of Blackrock buying up all the houses in this Houston neighborhood and paying well over 50% above asking price. I don't know if you heard about that. Blackrock trying to become America's landlord.
It's very profitable to have monthly rent payments hit their bank account. So they were very willing to pay $100,000, $200K over asking price and buy up all of these new neighborhoods because what they want is to create a lower and middle rentier class, which is paying them. And then they can use more of the money that they're getting in this feedback loop to pay even higher for prices and drive out average middle class consumers.
I love how the conspiracy theory, the speculation, and the also using a lot of words to say very little just keeps evolving as Saagar and Krystal feed off of each other. I understand why people are really entertained by this show because it's fantastic, much in the same way that the Alex Jones show is fantastic because the host should be wearing tinfoil hats. They're trying to make permanent renters, and Blackrock is trying to destroy the middle class. Why? I don't know, because I assume that the evil elites hate the middle class because reasons and want to make them poorer because profits. Isn't profits a scary word? Now, there's one problem with everything that Saagar and Krystal have said so far, that this is all based on Blackrock buying up all these homes in a neighborhood, just snapping those homes up, and turning what used to be homes owned by homeowners into renterships because they want to rentier class. But here's the problem. This didn't happen. This story is wildly misreported and one of the greatest games of internet telephone and fake news spreading that you can possibly imagine. The number of homes in the Wall Street Journal article cited that Blackrock bought from individual homeowners and converted into renterships in order to create a permanent rentier class was zero. What Blackrock actually purchased were homes that were not for sale to people as individuals. It was an entire neighborhood built up by a construction firm for the purpose of renting out those units. And in fact, at the time that it was sold, 98% of the 124 units were already filled with renters. This is a rental community that was built up to meet the demand because people are moving to Houston. People really needed these properties. They were always meant to be sold in a bundle, and BlackRock did not pay 50 or 20% or whatever number over market value. These homes sold for about 1 to 2% over the next bid and an offer to speed up closing costs for the person who built up these homes.
How hot is the Austin housing market? Shout out to the Austin American Statement. Homes are regularly selling for $100K or more above asking.
Wow.
1,500 Austin area homes from January 1st to May 23rd sold for $100K above asking. In the same time frame in 2020, only 22 homes hit that threshold.
That 20 to 50% higher bids by these mega private equity investors that want to create a rentier class that Saagar quoted out, the $100,000 to $200,000 more, is completely made up. In fact, it's actually a combination of 3 different sets of numbers that were combined into this monstrous conspiracy gobbledygook so it could be presented by these two as if it were legitimate. And we're going to go into the 50% number first. The 50% number refers to the gross profit that the developer that sold the property to the financial investing firm made on the construction of the homes. And the reason why this person was able to make that much money is because at the time that these properties that, again, were not designed to be sold individually, that were always designed to be sold as a package to some kind of developer or investment firm, were built, there was no lumber shortage, there was no shortage of copper wire, there was no shortage of components used to build a house. Also, there was no artificially low interest rates by the Federal Reserve. So this person built at the right time and was fortunate enough to sell at the right time where market conditions could increase the profit more than he could have ever imagined. Number 2, the 20% number refers to some people who have been able to sell their home above the asking price. And the 100 to 200,000 number refers to other people in other locations who were able to get those numbers for their homes. This was combined into a tweet thread, and I know you're going to be shocked by this, made by somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, and it has been reported across the country because that tweet thread went viral. It's not based on anything logical. It's all emotion and all people seeing what they want to see. And fundamentally, it's asinine on its face, because here's the thing. If you're a big financial firm, the last thing you want to do is outbid everyday home buyers, because the time that it takes for you to get into bidding wars with these people and to buy up all these homes is time wasted, and time is money, and there's way more efficient ways to buy up property in this manner. And that is why in the Houston story, they bought up rental properties that were all owned by one person that was already rented out to 98% capacity, because going door to door to individual homeowners to offer their money is just a waste of time. Also, once word gets around that a corporation is buying up an entire neighborhood, what ends up happening is that the homes that sell later end up holding out for way more money because they think that there's some reason behind this mega corporation trying to buy up all this property. This is why anytime you have a story like Disney World being built in Orlando, they create a bunch of shell corporations and they try to buy the homes as quietly as possible. So not only is it incredibly time consuming and thus inefficient to buy up an entire neighborhood from individual homeowners in the way that's being described by Saagar and Krystal Ball, but it also has the problem of diminishing returns, because as you get closer to your goal of buying up more of the neighborhood, you experience holdouts and you end up having to pay more, making the investment less valuable over time. This is why investors don't own a huge share of single-family homes, because it doesn't make any sense for them to do so. Also, these are not immediately profitable assets. So let me go back to the deal in question, the $32.2 million spent on these 124 rental homes. If you were to price the rent at each of these homes at around $1,500, which based on, again, my rudimentary research into this general area would not be too high or too low, it would take about 14 years for you to break even, assuming that you didn't borrow any money, you're not paying any interest payments, and you had 100% occupancy, and you didn't have to repair any of these homes. which, by the way, roofs tend to last about 14 years. Air conditioning systems tend to break down in 7 to 10 years, etc., etc. There would definitely be some repairs there. So you're looking at an investment that will probably be profitable for the company if they have 100% occupancy, if things don't change, about 16 or 17 years, assuming everything goes absolutely right with these rental properties. Now, I know Saagar and Krystal are pitching us this idea that these investment firms want to create a permanent renter class, so there might be some ideological motivation that I'm not considering in here, but just think about that before you go off into crazy town conspiracy theory land. This is actually not that profitable of an investment. And by the way, the only reason I know any of this information is because someday I actually hope that I will be able to buy up a duplex or a triplex, or is it a triplex? We'll just call it a duplex plus one, and maybe be able to have some passive rental income myself. So I've been researching this and graphing out where these small investments would be profitable for somebody like me. So this is the only reason I knew when I heard this story that there was something wrong with the way that it was being reported. Had that not been the case, I could have gotten suckered in by all these smooth-talking conspiracy theorists, just like the majority of the internet.
So all of that being said, who do you think is coming to their defense? Because you know their lackeys have to do it. Oh, well, one of them, Ben Shapiro. And look, I love this because Ben every once in a while just takes off the mask and shows us like how much of an actual radical that he is.
Yeah, that's true.
Here's what he says. I see many people are enraged at BlackRock. BlackRock is buying homes from people willing to sell them. If you don't like what they're doing, target the loose governmental policy incentivizing this investment. By the way, by this he means the Federal Reserve, which has nothing to do with this. The Federal Reserve, which has nothing to do with this. The Federal Reserve, which has nothing to do with this.
So of course they get mad at Ben Shapiro for accurately reporting that the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, artificially low interest rates for home mortgages, is what's actually driving up the prices for these loans, and that's causing people, everyday people, to overpay even above asking prices for homes because money is so cheap. It's actually worth it for them to do so in what they believe to be our growing, burgeoning neighborhoods. They get mad at him and they say he's going mask off, that he's serving the 1% in the investment class. And then they start rambling on about a dystopian world where you're going to be forced to fix up your rental property for your corporate landlord.
They do everything they possibly can to save every single penny. So that means if something goes catastrophically wrong in your home, they're not going to fix it, or it's going to be on you to fix it.
So this is where we get into peak buffoonishness. Now Krystal's telling us that if these corporations are your landlord, then somehow they're going to force you to fix up the home and increase the value of the home so that they can rent it or sell it for higher prices, something, etc., which is absolutely nonsensical. She also talks about how they're going to take you to court and sue you over absolutely anything, which is weird because tenants don't have a lot of money, so good luck suing them. I mean, have you guys seen any episodes of Judge Judy? The truth is, when you're renting out a property, you are taking on significantly more risk than somebody who is renting from you. Because if anything goes wrong in the property, if something falls into disrepair, if there's an issue of any kind, ultimately you own the property and therefore you're responsible for it. You can collect a security deposit to cover some of the incidentals and damage, etc., but any fundamental problems with the property are going to be on the homeowner. This is yet another reason why these corporations are not jumping into all of these random homes, despite what these conspiracy theorists are trying to tell you, because it's actually incredibly risky, because whenever you have more than 8 tenants, one of them is going to be an absolute monster that's going to cost you significantly more than the 7 others.
Imagine paying your check once a month to BlackRock. As you say, oh, your sink is broken? Screw you. You know why? Because it's not like my house. If you're a starter landlord or whatever, your sink is broken, you're like, hey, man, this is my house. You got to make sure I fix this, all of that. I got to rent this to somebody else. BlackRock, they don't care.
This is what we've devolved to in the conversation. Now we're talking about an imaginary sink in an imaginary rental home that is landlorded upon, I guess that's the correct terminology, definitely not, but we're just going to continue, that is landlorded upon by an imaginary private equity firm that's like, we're not going to fix that sink, you're just going to have to do it because we want to make a rentier class. I'm going to poke you with the barbecue fork at the same time for reasons unknown. Like, so they get every number wrong. They get every fact about the story wrong. They misrepresent every single statistic they try to quote. And now we're talking about a sink not getting fixed in one of these homes. That's the level that we're operating at.
Your sink is broken. You're like, hey, man, this is my house. You got to make sure I fix this, all of that. I got to rent this to somebody else. Blackrock, they don't care. They'll literally sue me. They'll be like, sue me. Go ahead. What are you going to do? You're not going to sue it.
So,
you can't do anything. You have no rights.
These scenarios are so absurd, it's unbelievable that they're coming out of the mouths of adults. I mean, Saagar actually says that people don't want to sue these mega corporations. People love suing mega corporations. If you slip and fall in a Walmart because somebody forgot to put a wet floor sign around the Walmart, you don't sue the employee that forgot to put up that sign. You sue Walmart corporate because that's where all the money is. If these landlords, these corporate landlords, turn out to be slumlords, then people do have recourse against them in a way that they don't have against your mom and pop landlord. I've heard multiple different scenarios of people dealing with legitimate slumlords here in New York City, and because the slumlord was a guy that was actually going broke himself, they couldn't really do anything about it because they didn't have the money, because they didn't have the institution that you could sue for these problems. Also, the idea that tenants are going to be responsible for all these repairs, etc., is nonsensical as well. Perfect example of this is that I know somebody who's renting out a property. One of the toilets in one of the tenants of the property had a leaky pump. This leaky pump was not reported to the landlord from the tenant for months on end. Then they got a bill that was $3,000 higher for water than they would normally get because this tenant left the toilet pump constantly running. When they went into the apartments to check all of the different water fixtures to figure out what was going on, they found out that it was this tenant. They didn't report it. It was a $15 repair that would have saved the landlord $3,000, and there was absolutely no recourse at all for the landlord. So this is just made up. And in reality, the exact opposite of what you're being pitched is infinitely more common in landlord versus renter situations.
First crack.
This is, again, it takes the human element out of it. When Blackrock is your landlord, or owns all the houses in your neighborhood, do you really have a neighborhood? Like, that's what part of it is.
Now, fundamentally, I don't have a problem with people who try to cross partisan lines in order to find common ground. I think it's a good and healthy thing that we don't let where we stand on the political spectrum divide us from getting along and finding compromises. However, the reason I can never get on board this populist train is because it's such an incoherent and nonsensical ideology, and when I can't pin down what you believe, and you're just randomly saying ridiculous thing after ridiculous thing and vaguely opposing these elite shadowy forces that are supposedly doing all of these things for nefarious purposes, even though that's insane, I'm not going to get on board with you. And this is why The Hill Rising, or whatever the show's called, Breaking Dawn Part 2, is just something that I can't get on board with. Total nonsense through and through, from front to back. Every attempt at quoting numbers in the beginning was completely false and a total failure. And then there's just random speculation about sinks and potential asbestos in these new construction homes because corporations can make you eat asbestos too.
Blackrock doesn't care about you. They care about their office in Manhattan and in Beijing, in Shanghai, and in London, and in Brussels, and then where all of their executives live in the, Greenwich, Connecticut.
And if
they
it
could
will
care less.
Beware of anybody who tells you all the time how they can see beyond partisan lines and then starts naming as a component of their argument unpopular neighborhoods or institutions like Wall Street or this rich neighborhood or DC or that rich neighborhood, because they're probably selling you a bill of goods, and that's exactly what Breaking Dawn Part 2 is doing in this segment. But hey, those are just my thoughts. It's backed up by reality, but feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, it's linked in the description, support me via the support links. This has been me talking about Krystal and Saagar. Till next time.